Today I got a bombshell level information for you guys on the Dark Ether story, which I'm sure you guys already could tell what it is, but let's get into this. But before we get directly into the juice of this video, we first need to give a little bit of an update on what has happened with Samantha recently, because this is directly tied to her. But as you guys remember from the Firebase Z story, Samantha showed up at Outpost 25 to meet up with Ravnoff. Instead, she was captured by Dr. Peck and was tortured and then thrown into the Dark Ether. Of course, then Requiem shows up. They go and get Samantha out of the Dark Ether, and they leave with her to some place that we are currently unaware of. And that's really all we knew. The major takeaways we had from Samantha is that she would seem kind of dazed when she got out of the Dark Ether, and also her eyes were clearly have that Dark Ether glow to them. But more recently, and in a document that we've obtained through Outbreak, we got an update on what Samantha has been doing post Firebase Z. And it seems like Samantha has been kept under quarantine under Requiem, and they have ran tests on her to see how the Dark Ether has affected her. And what they have found is that she's in pretty good physical shape, but for some reason her psychological state is very, very messy. She's missing memories, she has memories that are questionable, and she just seems generally confused on what's going on here. Something we are completely used to if we remember back to the Ether storyline. We always knew 115 messed with your memories and would cause amnesia and also give you delusions, which matches up perfectly with what we are seeing Samantha currently suffer from right now. But the other thing we learned from this document that is very important is that we learn how long she was trapped inside the Dark Ether. And at least in the real world, or the regular world, she was trapped in the Dark Ether for 40 hours or 2 days. But what she has reported to Requiem is that instead of just being trapped in there for 2 days, she was instead trapped there for months. And this is something we are familiar with. We are familiar with the time dilation between the regular world and the Dark Ether. Time just moves faster in the Dark Ether. But what we didn't actually know is how drastic of a time dilation this was. And to turn 2 days into multiple months is insane, to say the very least. But the final thing that is mentioned here is who is aware of Samantha and where she's being held. Of course, the document that is being written is actually to Major Carver, Dr. Strauss, and Dr. Gray. So we know they're aware of him. Weaver is the one who wrote this, so of course he is aware of Samantha. And then the medical staff working on Samantha is aware of this situation. But the final person is the director. He is currently aware of her situation, which the director is an incredibly interesting character on his own, which we will not get into in this video because he earns his own video. But of course, now that we have an understanding of what Samantha is currently going through and her current experience, how she's has this kind of delusions and this whole psychological effect that the Dark Ether has had on her, it now brings us to the piece of document that is actually important. And what this is a Samantha Max's diary entry. And get ready for this, but I'm going to read this all the way through. Sometimes I find it hard to sleep, even though I look forward to it. When I dream, I see faces. Faces of people I care about, and faces of people that don't care for me. Sometimes it's hard to distinguish between the two, but one face stands out from all the others. A face of a child. A boy. He is lost, damaged. I want to help him, but somehow I feel he is dangerous. Dreams are unreliable witnesses, as I am too. Sometimes I find it hard to sleep. So I'm getting goosebumps just reading that off again, but if you guys don't know what that means and why this is a huge drop of information for the story, let me quickly give you some background. So, in the previous story, the Ether story, we had the universe get reset, and that's where the Dark Ether came from. But only 2 people from the previous Ether storyline came over from the Ether universe to this Dark Ether universe. And this is what we saw in the ending to Togder Toten. We see Samantha And of course, the person that we are talking about today, Eddie. They are the two people who entered from the original Ether universe into this universe, and the only two leftovers. And of course, this is directly in relation to what is said, and I'll read it again, the face of a child, a boy. This most definitely is Eddie. This is Eddie and Richtofen'S reintroduction, official reintroduction into the storyline, and it is insane. But this gives us more than just that. It just doesn't tell us Richtofen is officially in this story, but more than that, it gives us an idea of what Richtofen has been doing in the story so far, or the lack of knowing what he's been doing, and then further, also his seeming what he may be doing in this story. But first, we have to talk about how she remembers Eddie, because she doesn't remember Eddie as an adult or as a grown-up. Instead, we hear her saying the face of a child, a boy, which is interesting because obviously we could tell just by looking at Samantha, she's no longer a child. She's a full-grown woman in her early 30s. But for some reason, her only memories of Eddie of while he was a boy, and clearly if time has passed, Eddie should also be older. So this means that Eddie and Samantha had been split apart from a young age. So she has not seen Eddie since she was a child, and that really gives us two possibilities of what could be happening here. And that rather means that Samantha and Eddie just got separated when they first arrived here. They got separated somewhere along the way, and it was unfortunate like that. Or the other possibility, and the much more intriguing possibility, is that they got separated from the get-go. The second they walked through that portal from the ether to the dark ether, that's when they got separated, and they haven't been together since they arrived. And this is incredibly interesting because it'll leave the possibility for Eddie to do whatever in the heck he's been doing this entire time without the knowledge of Samantha, which is interesting on its own, but it also leaves a different possibility. And this could also mean that not only were they separated through where their locations are or through where they are in space, but also, what if they were separated in time? What if they arrived in this universe at different points in time? What if Samantha arrived in the 50s or 60s? But then Eddie, he arrived maybe earlier, maybe later, most likely earlier, and maybe he arrived during the creation of End Station. I'm not sure, not going to say anything just yet, but it leaves so many possibilities. But of course, another thing that is very important to Eddie's role in the story that we find out here is something that is very interesting, because in the past we saw Richtofen have two different sides to him. We have the Ultimus Richtofen, who is generally not a good guy, right? He's pretty evil. But then you have Primus Richtofen, who maybe you don't want to call a good guy, but he's trying to do what's right. Like, that's his whole thing during his whole role as being Primus Richtofen. He's trying to do what's right. So it left the question up, how is Eddie going to be? Is he going to be more like Primus Richtofen, trying to do what's right, but maybe not a good guy? Is he just going to be a good guy? Or is he going to be more like Ultimus Richtofen? And this is our first look at what type of role he may be playing in the story. And I'll read it off again, but it's when Samantha in her diary says, the face of a child, a boy. He is lost, damaged. I want to help him, but somehow I feel he is dangerous. So right there, it's setting the tone for what type of role Richtofen is going to be playing in the story. It seems like he's returning back to at least some sort of villain role, at least from the perspective of Samantha, which is incredibly interesting, and it gets me incredibly excited to see what is going to go on. And I cannot wait to see Richtofen back in this story into a further extent, and this is just the start of it. My gosh, this is what I live for this ether storyline, or this zombie storyline, stuff like this. But regardless, that's about it for me. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions on everything we've talked about here. I didn't really go into too much detail about other things that are mentioned here, but I really wanted to focus on Richtofen and his relationship with Samantha, his relationship with the story, and if he's going to be a good guy or bad guy, and also the separation of Samantha and Eddie. But if there's further things you want to discuss, definitely drop those down in the comments, because we're going to have a fun time discussing this, and I'm finally like really interested in the storyline again, and it's been a while since that's been the case, so I couldn't be more happy. But regardless, that's about it for me. If you guys did enjoy this video and you find it exciting, then definitely do all the normal YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, bell, share, and all that great stuff. But I'm gonna go, and I'll catch you guys next stream video over the next maybe, and laters, guys.